I will now recognize myself. Being acting chairman for John McCain is almost as powerful as I felt as having staff duty at Fort Myer, checking on General Odierno's house at 0200 in the morning. Although he was not there in 2007. He was in Iraq, and I want to thank him, as all my colleagues have, for his many years of distinguished service, particularly in that country. General Odierno, just in case you're not back in front of us again, as you no doubt hope that you are probably not. And General Welsh, thank you as well for your service. Both secretaries, thank you for your service to our country, for being here. We've heard many members of this committee talk about the dangers of sequestration to your services. We've heard before from the Navy and the Marine Corps as well. I think most of us, if not all of us, are in agreement. We're now engaged in a debate on exactly what to do about that during the budget season in both the House and the Senate. The House of Representatives proposed its budget today. I believe the Senate Budget Committee is working on a budget today as well. The drafts that have been introduced would keep the DOD portion of the base budget at $498 billion and spend some substantial more than that in so-called OCO funds, overseas contingency operations, perhaps as much as $90 billion. I think when you add in the non-DOD parts of the defense budget, it'd get up to about 613 or so. You don't necessarily need to comment on either budget, but I would like to hear what General Odierno and General Welsh have to say about the concept of funding the base budget at $498 for defense and a much larger OCO request than appears in the President's budget.
Thank you, Senator. So first, I would just say there's risk to not funding the base and putting in an OCO, because with that has to come a flexibility within OCO for us to spend it on the things that are necessary. So because OCO has limits and it has restrictions and it has very strict rules that have to be followed. And so if we're inhibited by that, it might not help us. What might happen at the end of the year, we have a bunch of money we hand back because we're not able to spend it. So the first thing is it would have to have some level of flexibility. Now, I would say that getting money in OCO, if there is flexibility with it, is certainly better than not getting any additional money. It could help us with readiness. They could, there's ways that maybe we could work with the committee to make it work. But I would tell you I'd much rather have it in the base budget, because at some time we're going to have to shift it to the base. And if we put it in OCO, we're just delaying that potential. It's going to have to happen at some time.
Would you, Senator McCain and Senator Reid have both called in their budget views letter for $577 billion, and they have endorsed in concept the National Defense Panel's recommendation of $611 billion as a minimum floor. If that were not to happen, if you did have the base budget somewhere around $498 and OCO somewhere around $90 billion, would you be able to stop some of the force reductions that you've predicted in your testimony before?
We would still be going to 450,000, 335,000 in the Guard, and 195,000 in Reserve. But what that money would do is it would help us with our readiness.
So force structure would probably not change, but readiness of the remaining force would improve.
But a potential, see, the problem with OCO is it's year-to-year funding, so we don't know how long it would go. So, but our ramp is continuing and down to 450.
General Welsh.
Senator, with modernization as a major issue we face, OCO presents some problems, because it's hard to start a new program with OCO when you're looking at a one-year budget cycle. It's not guaranteed over time. There are limits on what you can spend it on, so that is the big issue with us. Modernization is a huge deal for the Air Force at this point in time. But as Ray said, at some point in time, if it's green and it smells pretty and it's not your St. Patrick's Day tie, it's okay.
And are you talking primarily about longer-term modernization, like the long-range strike bomber, or shorter-term procurement matters as well?
I would think that the Congress would probably help us with flexibilities on the shorter term things. I'm more worried about for a platform-based force, Air Force or Navy, for example, the types of systems we buy will take longer and produce over time. It's not just the development, it's also the production and supply chain that goes on for 20, 30 years as you change hundreds of platforms.
General Odierno, we didn't touch on modernization. Obviously, the Army has a much smaller, lower unit cost platforms than does the Air Force. But would you care to touch on modernization, how this approach might?
Yeah. So again, it depends. So let me, if in OCO, we're not allowed to do, it limits what we can do for modernization if it's in OCO. Now, there's ways around that. So, for example, if our end strength was, if you had end strength over 475 or 450 funded in OCO, we could then use that money to do potentially modernization. But again, the wording and other things would have to be about right in order to make that happen. But there's some potential that we could use it for modernization depending on the flexibility that's inside of that.
So my time has expired, but if I could briefly synthesize what I think I'm hearing from both of you is not good, better than nothing, but depends heavily on the details of the kind of flexibility that the OCO funding provides.
Senator, if I could add, it would help us continue the readiness recovery that the last 2 years of BBA has allowed us to start, at least at the individual and unit level.
Best for readiness, marginal for force structure, not good for modernization. Thank you.